SCP-6284. This is where I lament. Object Class: Euclid. Special Containment Procedures. All Foundation employee dormitories located in halls A12 to A14 have been permanently relocated along with corresponding staff and belongings. Hall A13 has been sectioned off from the greater facility through the construction of new walls that isolate SCP-6284. Several cant counters are to be placed on the floor around SCP-6284's perimeter in a semicircle and are to be monitored remotely for any changes. Researchers studying SCP-6284 are to be knowledgeable in logical fallacies, as well as para-emotional projected constructs. Franklin Ergot is to receive weekly therapeutic counseling. Description: SCP-6284 is a logical gap embedded within the east-facing wall on hallway A13 in Site-22's employee housing subcomplex. SCP-6284 is unable to be perceived by individuals with baseline cognition due to its inherent logical fallacy. This creates a paradox that the human brain is unable to understand due to its complexity, producing a secondary antimemetic effect caused by the brain removing SCP-6284 from the subject's cognition. Footnote 1. For more information regarding logical fallacies, please contact the Department of Metaphysics, the Counterconceptual Department, the Department of Miscommunications, or the Department of Unreality in conjunction with the Surrealistics Department. Discovery: though it is currently unknown how long SCP-6284 has been located within Site-22, the anomaly itself was identified on May 31, 2022, when senior researcher Harold Dalloway, Footnote 2, head of parapsychological abstractisms and subcognitive logic within the Surrealistics Department, was temporarily transferred due to a scheduling error made by employee logistics. Footnote 3. Technicians are currently attempting to resolve the defunct programming that allowed for an empty employee slot within Site-22's active roster. During his stay, he was assigned temporary residence within Site-63 of hallway A13, quickly discovering SCP-6284 due to his constant department-mandated agnostic consumption. The following has been transcribed from researcher Dalloway's internal memo. Ms. Dugan, although it is quite difficult of me to explain the subsequent information relayed towards you in a way that is semantically and informationally sound, I must do my due diligence to tether my wires in a formation that helps paint a tapestry of the mind for you in order to spotlight and mend this glaring issue. As I was walking out of my little gilded prison chamber in order to meet up with Dr. Orson in the cafeteria, I was drawn into a quite peculiar sight indeed, as, while encompassing a good portion of the wall to my left was a fissure, quite large actually, and very deep. The fissure itself was charred and cracked around the edges, with faint scratch marks around the left side. And now I do actually recall a great amount of twisted metal in the vicinity of this crack. Yes, it was twisted and it was warped, I do believe. Possibly the remnants of one of our little breath boxes. Or are they unbreath boxes? Footnote 4. A Foundation Standard Airlock System. I am unaware if this crack was here yesterday when I had passed by the same hallway, or was I in A14? Well, I think you would know if there was a massive crack in the wall of A14 and would have told me accordingly, would you? At least a warning would have sufficed, a little, oh, and be wary of the crack in the wall. If you stick your arm in too far, you might fall into the starlit sky. Would have been more than enough to send me on my merry way down to my cell. Well, you did not warn me of this, and once again, I am unsure of whether or not it is located in A13, or A14, or A12. Although I do recommend that we look into this at once. As Site Director Alicia Dugan has a history with the Surrealistics Department, she immediately evacuated all residents in halls A12 through A14 before requesting the assistance of Mobile Task Force Omega-2. mind erasers, to locate and partially contain SCP-6284. Addendum 6284-1 Agnostic Testing. In order to ascertain the exact parameters of SCP-6284, various D-Class personnel were given incremental doses of measured agnostics in order to perceive and interact with the anomaly. Results summarized below. 2 units. SCP-6284 can be viewed and interacted with. It appears to be a fissure in the wall. 7 units. SCP-6284 can be viewed, interacted with, and described in greater detail. It is approximately 26 centimeters in width, while running a length of approximately 1.3 meters. There are portions of warped metal detritus surrounding the floor below SCP-6284. The fragments of metal appear to be partially charred in places, as are the edge of the fissure. 10 units. SCP-6284 can be viewed, interacted with, and sensed. D22045 reported the scent of burning roses. 20 units. SCP-6284 can be viewed, interacted with, and tasted. D22045 reported the taste of copper. Footnote 5. It was actually their blood. 30 units. The interior of SCP-6284 can be viewed. 40 units. The interior of SCP-6284 can be viewed and identified. It has been classified as SCP-6284-1. 48 units. The interior of SCP-6284, now classified as SCP-6284-1, can be viewed and described in greater detail. It is a portion of space filled with countless stars. 50 units. D22045's last remaining tooth falls out. 50 units. Sound can be registered coming from inside SCP-6284-1. 56 units. The sound is identified. It is the voice of an adult male. He is quietly sobbing and apologizing to Frankie. 74 units. The message written directly above SCP-6284 can be viewed. 80 units. The message written directly above SCP-6284 can be viewed and identified. 90 units. The message written directly above SCP-6284 can be viewed and described in greater detail. It reads, "It is not finished, but for you, I hope it is your solace. Signed, P." 110 units. There is something inside of SCP-6284-1. 150 units. There is something inside of SCP-6284-1. 165 units. There is something inside of SCP-6284-1. 180 units. The object inside of SCP-6284 has been classified as SCP-6284-1. Addendum 6284-2. Input by researcher Harold Dalloway. Now, I do believe that while a colleague of mine has the extensive knowledge to disclose such information to you, I think it is best that I seize the podium to tell this in their stead. After all, I do believe that their analysis will have a dearth of portrayal, nor the scope of the situation at hand, to properly relay the impact of why this has occurred in the first place. So I do ask that you please listen, and listen well. A long time ago, I believe, eons, millennia, days, hours, seconds ticking away, there was a man that would walk through pasty hallways shrouded in the dust of those that walked before him. And he would walk these hallways into little rooms that were shrouded in the thoughts of those who died for him and the cause he worked with. When the man traipsed these halls and when he entered these rooms, his own thoughts would stir in a biting frenzy that stripped his heart of its boundaries, causing it to become weak and easily subjected to attacks, onslaughts, and vulnerabilities. As time passed, His frantic and fleeting thoughts turned into muted and fleeting words, which quickly became him through and through in almost every way. Fleeting. His words would devour themselves before they could roll across his tongue, and soon enough, his very tongue threatened to swallow itself, as its usage meant it was susceptible to the crushing weight of pressure that teetered on any words it would forge. Despite the death of his own language due to this inverted pressure, the man found himself able to weave his mind a tapestry anew in the presence of a fellow cell. This other cell, also running a course in duty in the body of the sterile Leviathan, was one of joy and jest, eager to do its job and willing to bring its fellows up with it. This fellow worker always had a quick word thrown out into the circle to bring smiles and snippets of sensibility to brighten the man's darkening mind. As time passed, and the duties of the grunts began to impound deeper and deeper into his hollowed and numbed psyche, the man began to feel a little twisting, wriggling thing warp the inner annals of his chest that stirred and slowly unwound its way from the very top of his head into the arcs of his toes. It was warm and comforting, yet frantic in its composure, quickly juddering to life a stop-motion slither when the man was in the presence of his fellow cell. The man realized that he was smitten, smothered, taken aback with kindness. This was true. The man had fallen into the Aphrodisiac favors of the soul, but despite it all, he was not sure that his fellow cell felt the same. If his fellow cell even had the capacity to feel the same at all, and that caused the man great pain. As this man walked down these concrete arteries into the little chambers of the jailed god's heart, he would pass by a fracture in one of these great facades. This little fracture was a remnant of something that existed far before him, and far before his fellow cells. Specifically, this mere fracture was a remnant of a warm, beating heart that knew nothing but kindness. But alas, when the man discovered the fracture, the heart had stopped beating long ago, or it had never beat in the first place, or that the heart moved on to the places where hearts go when they no longer have the capacity to beat. Or it still beat, but it was on its moments before death. When the man discovered this fragment of the foregone heart, he saw it as a way to break free from the shackles of his pained and sorrowed steps. In doing so, in a moment of desperation, he twisted and folded and configured himself in such a way as to only consist of teardrops, sorrows, and raw bleeding heartache, allowing him to slip through the fracture into the abandoned sky of the never-beating heart. In this other place made of the remains of the never heart, the man knew a catharsis that bled from his pores and a shout wall that pierced through the pin-pricked white that was scattered through the air. And so he stayed there, bleeding the blood of the stars and hiding in his prison, his shame crystallizing in such a particular way as to make sure that nobody would ever be able to lay their eyes on him again. And so there he remains, of his own accord, a chrysalis. Addendum 6284-3 Employee Complaint. Junior researcher Franklin Ergot launched a formal complaint on February 12, 2022, regarding what he believed to be a missing Foundation employee. While his claim was investigated multiple times, no inconsistencies in employee attendance were identified. Despite this clarification, Ergot denied the given proof and insisted that there was a hole where Daniel used to be in the minds of Site-22's staff. This pattern of behavior continued despite multiple meetings and threats of demotion, culminating in Ergot suffering a psychotic episode after engaging in an argument with a colleague in the cafeteria. Ergot was then subdued and taken to the infirmary for evaluation. While this is currently assumed to be unrelated to SCP-6284, this information remains in this file at the insistence of researcher Dalloway. Thank you for listening to SCP-6284, This Is Where I Lament, by Quicksilvers. If you enjoyed this SCP, please like and subscribe, and follow the link in the description to the SCP Wiki, and vote it up to support the author and the SCP Wiki as a whole. I'd also like to give a shout out to my YouTube members: Powerless, Last of the Four Horsemen, Stephanie Miller, Senescence, Crescent Wolf, Bethany, Salzy, Joshua Vellacorda, Nerodia, and Brandon Henry. I'd also like to give a special shout out to the last week's donations via Ko-fi, which are Bethany and Dillagaff. Thank you for your direct support and supporting me as a YouTube member as well. If you would also like to have a Friday shout out, please follow one of the links in the description. YouTube memberships of Confidential will have access to Saturday members only videos. Ko-fi is the best way to donate directly to the channel. Thank you, and have a good weekend.